People plagued by demons, the leader of a satanic cult who might have gotten too close to the Dark Lord, and the most televised exorcism of all time. All of that on today's most amazing top 10 list. But first, let's give a huge shout out to our sponsor. Frag Pro Shooter is the hottest shooter on mobile devices, and you can jump in right now because it's free to play. There are over 70 million people who play this game, and 1 million who will be online at any given moment. You'll never need to worry about finding people to play with, and this game was made from the ground up for mobile devices, so the controls are precise. The gameplay is straightforward. You want to take out the enemy bunker before they get to yours. You'll have a cast of over 90 characters to help you do so, and how you pick them will give you endless strategies to win. There's constantly new content brought to the game with new characters to use all the time. The most recent addition to the club is Zap Girl. She has electrical powers that you can use to simultaneously stun and damage enemies. There are several game modes you can play. My favorite is Move the Payload, where you need to bring your cart to the center of the map. You can go on the offensive and slow down the enemy cart, or you can drop back on defense and push yours forward. Most amazing fans can join our club and play together. There are free rewards for everyone only through the link in our description, even for people who have already downloaded the game. Alright, now let's get into this list. Coming in at number 10, we have Amy Stamatis. KATV covered the story of a woman who nearly died after she fell from a window. It was a very suspicious case, and a lot of people were convinced that she jumped from the window in an attempt to take her own life. In the months leading up to the accident, Amy was plagued by horrible thoughts and nightmares. They were mostly voices that would pop in and out of her mind and tell her to harm herself. She was seeing several people about this. She went to a doctor and eventually saw a psychiatrist who prescribed her some medication, but the voices never stopped. Now, Amy said she was just sitting in the windowsill when she fell, but because of everything I just told you, you can understand why it would be hard to believe her story. Now, there is a good side to this. Because of this accident, Amy was visited by someone who practiced an unconventional form of medicine. She was apparently someone who would heal people through prayer. She worked on Amy and said that she saw demons inside her body. Apparently, this doctor of prayer was able to exorcise the demons out of Amy's body, and she wasn't plagued by dark thoughts or demons any longer. Coming in at number 9, we have George Lukins. If you shoot back to the 1700s, you better believe that there's going to be your fair share of demon possession stories. George Lukins was just a regular dude, and then out of nowhere he started to get sick and act very strange. He started to growl like an animal and walk on all fours. This was obviously concerning to the people who knew him and knew that he wasn't that strange of a fellow. So Lukins was taken to a church where they performed a massive exorcism on him. Apparently 7 different demons were pulled out of his body, and then he was back to being just a normal dude. Coming in at number 8, we have the Corrupted One. Reddit user Dark Flash Knight had a very interesting story about seeing horrific things when they were sleeping, and they think it might have been a demon tormenting them. It started out of nowhere. They didn't move into a new house or encounter someone who was creepy or buy anything that might have been cursed. Those are all the usual suspects when crazy things start happening. They said they just started to have horrible dreams about committing crimes and doing sickening things to people. Their dreams were vivid, like they were watching everything happen through a first-person view of someone else, but they could feel and hear everything. It was like they were doing it, but they couldn't make themselves stop, even though they knew everything they were doing was wrong. This started to torment them so badly that they were afraid to even fall asleep. Eventually, they started to seek help. It didn't matter what pills they took, what therapists they saw, or who they talked to, nothing seemed to deal with the problem that they were having. Eventually, they told a friend who was concerned, and their friend was a medium who decided to host a seance for them. Through this, they discovered that there was a demon who was feeding off of their misery as they slept. They got rid of the creature through a series of blessings that the medium washed over the home. Coming in at number 7, we have Richard Gallagher and Julia. When you work for the church, it's only a matter of time before you have to go to battle with the devil. I mean, I think that's the case. I don't really know because I've never been to church. But for Richard Gallagher, that was for sure the case. Richard Gallagher was a professor in religious studies at Columbia University. He was eventually approached by a woman who only gave her first name, and that was Julia. Julia was a goth icon who claimed that she was the head of a satanic church. Now, why would she come to a man of God if she was always getting down and dirty with the devil? Well, it was because she was worried about being possessed. You play with fire, eventually you're going to get burned. Richard claimed that when he was around Julia, things would fly off the shelves and he would see her image appear when she wasn't there. Coming at number 6, we have Home Alone. This story scared the hell out of me. I couldn't find a news story about it, but there were a few stories about it floating around on the internet, and it freaked me out enough to throw it on this list. It's the story about a girl who is living alone and craving to be successful. I can vibe with that, but I don't think I would go to the lengths that this woman was willing to go to. She apparently started to use black magic, summoning and communicating with a demon to help her be the cutthroat winner that she always wanted to be. Apparently the people around her started to see her rise to the top, but she changed big time. Being around her would make you feel horrible. Not like she was mean or anything, like it would physically drain you. And then one day, out of nowhere, she was gone. This is someone who was becoming an icon in her field, and she vanished like when you take a ghost poop and there's no poop on the toilet paper. Eventually, police came to her apartment and what they found was horrifying. There were demonic symbols all over the home, a massive pentagram etched into the floor, and animal sacrifices hanging from the ceiling. One of the most concerning parts about this was that there was a series of hoof prints that looked like they were burned into the floor. But this lady was nowhere to be found, and to this day no one knows what happened to her. Coming in at number 5, we have Stuck in the Basement. If you were to encounter a demon, I think this would be one of the worst things that could happen. This was pulled off of Bored Panda, and it followed someone who was doing some work in their basement. They were ripping up the floorboards, and then they found some satanic symbols and passed out. They woke up 2 days later when a friend came over to check on them. They had bruises all over their body and they were struggling to move. Their friend took them to the hospital, and they found out that they were extremely dehydrated and all their wounds on their body were self-inflicted. This person couldn't remember what happened to them at all, but they knew that something was in control of their body the entire time. He came back to his home once he was all patched up, and the symbols in his basement were gone. After this, he didn't have any issues, but he never got to the bottom of what happened. Coming in at number 4, we have Gina. Let's head back to the 90s for a possession story that was televised. This is the story of Gina, a girl who is clearly showing signs of psychosis, but her parents were convinced that she was possessed by a demon, so they had an exorcism performed on her that was shown on ABC, and 29 million people watched. Gina claimed that 2 demons were inside her body, Zion and Minga. After the exorcism, she was thankfully rehospitalized so she could receive proper help. Coming in at number 3, we have The Nun. For this one, we're going to have to blast back to the year 1676, and we are going to meet a nun named Maria. You think if you were a nun, you would be so close to God that you would be safe from anything demonic, but you would be wrong. When she was alive, Maria talked about how she would constantly struggle because she would get messages from demons. They would try to persuade her to do horrible things, but she was a lady of faith and she would push these thoughts and voices down. That was until she was 31 years old and found dead. It would seem that she had taken her own life, but what made this case so famous was the fact that she had a note on her that would be later called Satan's engram. The note took years to decode, but once it seemed that the message was sent from the devil himself and spoke of his distaste for foolish humans and how they thought they could use God to escape the prison of man, and other stuff about the river Styx and how we're all going to hell, you know, regular devil stuff. Coming in at number 2, we have Not the Dog. Apparently there's nothing sacred in the world anymore. I mean, you can possess people, or maybe aliens or robots, but pets, those are off the table. This story is wild. A Reddit user talked about how their family dog became the victim of possession. Apparently there was someone in their neighborhood who was a witch, and this witch had a cat, and their dog got into a scuffle with the cat, which left the cat pretty hurt. The witch confronted the family about it, and she wanted some sort of compensation for her cat's vet bills, which seems pretty fair if you ask me, but the family was like, no way! And instead of going down the traditional American route of suing the family, she put a curse on the dog to be possessed by a demon, which she told the family about. She wanted them to know that it was her. After this, the dog was literally insane. It attacked the family, it was destroying the house. They thought that they were going to have to put their dog down, but there's nothing a family won't do for their family pet. So they made a plea with the witch to lift the curse in exchange for paying for the medical bills. And the witch obliged, and then the family dog returned back to normal. Now, I don't know who was right in this debacle, but I think the main lesson here is don't mess with witches because they are up to some crazy stuff. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Michael Taylor. I think if someone is being violent, you shouldn't assume that they have a demon in their body before you try and get them arrested, because if you let someone walk around like a normal person because you fix them with an exorcism, then they can still harm people. If it's the other way around and they are in prison, you can at least pull off the the exorcism when they're in prison. This is basically what happened with Michael Taylor. He was part of a church group and married to a woman named Christine. Over the course of a few months, he started to become more and more hateful towards his wife and the other people at the church. Eventually, this all came to a headway when the church people confronted him about having an affair with the head of the church group, Marie. This caused Michael to lose his mind and attack both Marie and his wife. Now, both of these women were okay after this attack, but instead of calling the police, the church group thought it would be a great idea to have an exorcism and then send Michael Taylor back home. Let me tell you, this wasn't a great idea. When he got home, he murdered his wife, dismembered her face, and then killed their family dog. He was later arrested and tried to use his defense of being possessed, and that didn't fly and he was thrown in prison. Alright guys, that has been our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I've been your host, Jade Arena, and until next time, keep enjoying this content.